Floodwaters surged through Southern California on the evening of November 14, 2025, long before many residents understood just how severe the situation was becoming. Streets in low-lying neighborhoods began to fill, storm drains backed up, and runoff spilled over curbs as the first pulse of a strengthening atmospheric river collided with the coast. Weather models had issued warnings for days, but few imagined how quickly the water would rise or how profoundly the storm would reshape the region. Rain spread inland in steady sheets, hitting Santa Barbara and Ventura counties first. What started as manageable pooling on roads rapidly escalated. Within hours, streams swelled into churning channels, culverts overflowed, and shallow dips in the terrain turned into unexpected currents. As the moisture plume locked into the coastline, the rainfall intensified, transforming quiet residential blocks into corridors of rushing water. Winds accelerated over the ridgelines, pushing waves harder against the beaches and driving heavy rain horizontally against homes and storefronts. Across the coastal mountains, foothills, and densely populated valleys, gauges began recording staggering rainfall totals. Hour after hour, the numbers climbed 2 inches, then 3, then 4, far surpassing typical November storms. In elevated areas, totals surged even higher, soaking the ground to its limit. Meteorologists monitoring the system warned that it was slow-moving, an especially dangerous trait that meant the same communities could be struck repeatedly with no break in between. But the true danger lay in where the water was falling. Vast sections of Los Angeles and Ventura counties had burned earlier that year in severe wildfires, leaving behind unstable slopes stripped of vegetation. The heat of those fires had baked the soil into a hydrophobic crust that repelled water instead of absorbing it. Without roots to anchor the ground, even light rainfall could trigger movement, and this storm was delivering far more than that. As rain rates increased, evacuation warnings were issued for multiple burn-scarred neighborhoods. Alerts buzzed on phones. Firefighters knocked on doors. Families living below steep hillsides were urged to pack quickly. Officials reminded residents of the unsettling truth: water would not soak into the scorched land. It would race downslope, carrying mud, rocks, tree limbs, and whatever else it swept up. Through the night, rainfall intensified further. Some locations measured nearly an inch per hour, enough to overwhelm drains and flood urban streets in minutes. On the coast, communities experienced some of their wettest November conditions on record. Inland neighborhoods watched their roads transform into fast-moving, brown-tinged rivers swirling with sediment and broken debris. By late night, the storm unleashed its full force on the mountains and foothills. What had been relentless rain turned into outright deluge. The roar of the downpour drowned out traffic and even the faint glow of city life. Rain hammered rooftops with unbroken fury. In burn zones, water began slicing through softened soil, turning weakened slopes into channels of sliding air. In the canyons of Los Angeles County, movement began subtly: a few trickles of mud, a small collapse of soil. Moments later, entire sections of hillside gave way. What followed were rapid, concrete-thick flows of mud and debris, sweeping downhill with terrifying speed. Some carried tree trunks, others shoved aside boulders large enough to crush cars. Roads vanished under churning sludge, retaining walls crumbled. Homes tucked beneath the hills found themselves directly in the path of unstoppable, mud-filled torrents. Emergency responders struggled to reach stranded families. Mud blocked key routes. Trees lay scattered across major roads. Washed-out pavement made travel dangerous or impossible. Many residents sheltered in place, watching water and earth barrel past their homes. Others fled at the last moment, driving through darkened neighborhoods where power outages had extinguished streetlights. With the storm cloud cover sealing the sky in pitch black, even early morning felt like deep night. By sunrise on November 15th, the damage was unmistakable. Streets were buried beneath thick layers of mud. Vehicles lay half submerged or completely encased. Power poles leaned or toppled, their bases loosened by saturated ground and fierce winds. In hillside communities, people stepped outside to discover their yards replaced by fresh channels of mud carved straight through their property. And the storm had only paused, not ended. Later that afternoon, the atmospheric river delivered a second, punishing surge of rain. Falling on land already saturated to its limit, the new downpour triggered additional debris flows and new rounds of flooding. Authorities expanded evacuation zones, schools closed, highways shut down, Emergency shelters opened for those who had no homes or no safe paths to return to. First responders pulled motorists from rapidly rising waters and reached drivers trapped behind walls of mud and rock. Families unable to drive out climbed to upper floors, waiting for water levels to drop. The storm strained every aspect of emergency preparedness: communication systems, rescue teams, transportation networks, and shelter capacity. Along the coast, waves battered piers and flooded beachfront parking lots. Inland, water rushed across intersections, overtaking asphalt and sweeping trash and branches downstream. Wind gusts toppled weakened trees and scattered broken limbs across yards and sidewalks. The storm left its mark not only through flooding, but by eroding slopes, undermining foundations, and disrupting lives built precariously close to California's dramatic topography. By the evening of November 15th, the atmospheric river finally began to pull away. What it left behind was a transformed landscape. Hillsides etched with new scars, roads fractured or missing, vehicles embedded in dried mud, and homes layered in thick deposits of debris. Cleanup would take days or weeks and rebuilding would take far longer. Yet even as crews restored power, reopened roads, and assessed structural damage, conversations quickly expanded to the broader implications. The storm wasn't a rare anomaly. California had been experiencing increasingly intense atmospheric rivers, harsher wildfire seasons, and dangerous overlap between the two. Burned terrain was repeatedly struck by heavy storms before it had time to recover, setting the stage for cycles of destruction. The November 14th to 15th event exposed the fragile balance of the region. Rain became landslides, runoff became floods. Infrastructure proved vulnerable. Communities built on steep terrain faced risks amplified by climate-driven extremes. Still, the days that followed highlighted Southern California's resilience. Neighbors clearing driveways together, volunteers delivering food and supplies, shelters welcoming displaced families, and agencies working nonstop to stabilize damaged neighborhoods. And many residents, despite loss, expressed gratitude simply to have survived. The storm of November 2025 would be remembered not only for its power, but for the lessons it forced into view. It underscored the link between wildfire and flooding, revealed the new reality of climate extremes, and illuminated the delicate relationship between California's beauty and its hazards. As the sun returned, drying mud-coated roads and exposing the storm's true footprint, communities began the long task of rebuilding and reevaluating the environment they called home. The storm had ended, but its impacts would echo through reshaped terrain and altered lives for months, even years. And when the skies finally cleared, Southern California did what it always does: look toward the horizon with the understanding that more tests would come, and with the determination to face them. In the days that followed, recovery proved far more complex than the simple disappearance of rain. Storms linger in the soil, in disrupted routines, and in landscapes permanently changed by every flood and slide. Across mountain communities, geologists and engineers inspected channels gouged into the land, searching for cracks, bulges, or signs of renewed instability. They reminded residents that slopes can remain dangerous for weeks. Moisture trapped deep within the earth can trigger delayed movement long after the storm passes. Some neighborhoods were told not to return until assessments were complete. Displaced families stayed with relatives, in hotels, or in emergency shelters, waiting anxiously for updates. Others confronted the reality that their homes were damaged, or too unsafe, to occupy anytime soon. Cleanup crews worked nonstop. Excavators scraped away dense layers of mud, revealing buried roads. Truck after truck hauled out debris, tree trunks, shattered pavement, broken fences, boulders dragged from hillsides. Workers sprayed down sidewalks and building walls, washing thick, brown runoff into the drainage system. In certain areas, the mud lay so deep that crews had to remove it gradually, shaving off layers like wet clay. Cars buried to their windows were unearthed and towed. Some homeowners discovered their vehicles had been shoved several meters from their original spots, startling proof of the sheer power of the debris flows. As infrastructure slowly returned, stories of the storm began to emerge. An elderly couple recounted watching the slope behind their home slump downward, folding like a wave of soil rolling in slow motion. Their house sat inches away from disaster. A young family described waking to water breaching their front door, scooping up mud, leaves, and splintered wood as it rushed inside. They escaped minutes before a surge of debris swept through their street. In another neighborhood, neighbors dug out the front door of a trapped woman whose house had been sealed shut by mud. Her calls for help had gone unheard during the storm's chaos, and she was freed only when people checked on one another the next morning. Scientists analyzed the atmospheric river in detail. Its moisture levels ranked among the highest recorded for November in the region. They cited warm ocean waters and shifting climate patterns as contributing factors. Atmospheric rivers, they explained, have grown longer, more moisture-laden, and more frequent. Each degree of warming in the Pacific increases the atmosphere's capacity to hold water, fueling storms capable of massive rainfall in short bursts. Climate researchers visited wildfire-burned scars to study how scorched terrain responded. They discussed the soil water threshold, the point at which ground can no longer resist pressure from accumulated moisture. Burned slopes reach that point much faster than healthy ones. Water races across them, peeling away topsoil in swift, violent flows. Without vegetation, nothing holds sediment in place. Once a slope fails, it behaves more like liquid than land. Officials, meanwhile, debated long-term strategies, updated evacuation routes, improved drainage networks, stronger warning systems. Some proposed reconstructing creek channels to handle higher flows. Others urged property owners to install barriers or reconsider building on high-risk hillsides. But such solutions are expensive. Reinforcing a single slope can require enormous resources, and relocating communities carries deep emotional and economic challenges. For many, family history outweighs fear. Despite obstacles, recovery advanced. Major roads reopened by late November. Power was restored. Schools resumed classes. Businesses inundated by floodwaters began repairs. Insurance teams documented losses across multiple counties. Yet reminders of the storm were everywhere. Mudlines stained homes. Slopes bore fresh scars visible for miles, riverbeds filled with sediment. And many neighborhoods still smelled of wet earth and uprooted vegetation. For weeks, people discussed the storm in markets, cafes, and community halls. Some called it a warning. Others spoke of exhaustion, fear, or grief. Emotional recovery often stretches long past the physical